Hey guys, welcome back, it's Ripe again. In today's video, an entitled Karen neighbor demands I put her in my will at gunpoint. She tries to steal my property, but I teach her a lesson. My name is Robert and I am 65 male and I am dying. And just as I began to come to grips with my mortality, the last thing I expected I needed to face was my hellish neighbor Betsy, who in some madness had decided that she was owed a substantial portion of my estate. In my 30 years of living in this neighborhood, I have seen many families come and go, few staying to the same tenure that I had. Betsy, 52 female, was another such case, an odd woman approaching her late 60s that lived in her childhood home next door. Over the years, my interactions with neighbors had been brief, bordering on non-existent, exceptions made for birthdays, barbecues, and community initiations. Betsy had always struck me as a sort of recluse or mean-spirited hermit. This feeling was commonplace in the area, as she often missed invitations to big gatherings and children knew to avoid her house while trick-or-treating. Things like she could be a real witch or something, but enough about that. The story in question properly began 4 months ago when, after being caught unluckily in a sudden storm, I caught pneumonia which plagued me for ages. Eventually, as the sickness seemed to get the better of me, my family took me into the hospital to oversee the rest of my recovery. Ordinarily, I never would have chosen to come in willingly. I've hated hospitals ever since I was a kid, early memories of the last goodbyes made to my grandparents and other relatives since. After a few days of strong medication and only sleep, I was starting to feel ready to leave when the doctor arrived for the daily checkup looking somber. In all seriousness, he explained that during my treatment they had discovered something abnormal in my condition and asked to run some extra scans. Assured by my otherwise fantastic health, I let him continue additional tests and I assumed I would still be returning home soon. The next morning I was met with horrible news. In their tests they found the cause of their worry. I had a brain tumor of considerable size that they could only estimate had miraculously gone unnoticed for years until now. To say I was in shock was an understatement. The rest of what the doctor had to say faded into the background as I stared out the window. I thought I was fully recovered and ready to return to normal life, now only to find my life cut drastically short. Numbness turned to outrage as I lashed out looking for anything that could keep me in denial. But I was apparently beyond saving. Despite this, the hospital had no intention to waste my time any longer. No amount of treatment or observation would do me any good. My beautiful family consisted of my loving wife, Camilla, 60 female, my son Jackson, 32 male, daughter-in-law Harriet, 32 female, and grandson Bobby, 2 male. My wife and son came to the hospital later that afternoon to take me home, immediately realizing from my expression that something was more serious. It was not a pleasant discussion but a necessary one, and nothing could hold back the tears. With what little hope and strength I could spare to comfort their suffering, I assured them that I would take care of everything related to the funeral and will soon. I kicked myself that we had never set up life insurance in the past, but even without it, I was ready to leave them a substantial pension and savings, which was a little weight off my shoulders. A knock at the door damn near gave me a heart attack, forgetting where we were for a minute. I expected it to be a nurse eager to kick me out for another patient, but I was met by a much worse surprise. The large frame of Betsy blocked the open doorways as she shuffled inside without waiting for our approval. She explained that she was here visiting a friend and was just passing by when she overheard my diagnosis. I thought she must have very good hearing to pick out our conversation amidst the chaos of the hospital around us, unless she was purposefully eavesdropping on us. Despite my suspicions, I saw no reason to pick a fight about it and told her the truth as my family watched on in puzzlement. We were stuck in conversation for a while until a nurse came to my rescue, asking if I was ready to check myself out. Betsy followed us out into the car park and I asked her to please keep the news to herself, not wishing to become the local gossip just yet. She promised to keep my secret as we parted ways. I wanted to believe her, but could not bring myself to hope. My fears were realized that very same evening when we were accosted by a number of surprise visits from tearful neighbors, all of course hearing about my condition from Betsy the blabbermouth. The next few days passed quickly, each phasing blankly into the next like an endless dream. By the end of it, I had seen more neighbors and doctors this week than I had in years. No one told me dying would be so much hard work. It was not all bad news, however. I did finally sort out the details of my will with the help of my wife, who had been my guardian and chauffeur since the diagnosis. While my body felt healthy and normal, the idea that I was just a ticking time bomb that could trigger at any moment did leave me feeling vulnerable, making it risky for me to be behind the wheel for long periods of time. This care persisted to the point that my family felt I was too unsafe to be left alone. My wife pleaded with her work for additional vacation days so she could stay at home with me, although I asked her not to. She was on the verge of quitting when she had been told to come back into the office, but after an exhausting debate, I managed to convince her that I could take care of myself. Shortly after, I began to settle into a nap when I heard a knock at the door. Pulling myself down the stairs, I got to the front door after 10 minutes of continuous knocking, despite my attempts at speaking up. And who should be at my door but my neighbor Betsy, who seemed pleased to see me. This was not unusual, but I didn't know her to be a patient woman, so I thought it strange that she was in no way annoyed for having to wait for me. Apparently, she had come to check up on me at the behest of my wife, bringing over a freshly baked cherry pie which she brought into the house and rested on the kitchen counter. In subtle terms, I noted how odd it was that my condition spread so quickly in gossip, though I gotta admit she wore a very good poker face, not admitting responsibility to it. As I was starting to get tired again, I wandered back over to the front door, followed closely by the nosy lady, who carried on talking regardless. Just as the conversation was wrapping up, she stopped me from closing the door to ask a stern and seemingly important question. Betsy began a long-winded speech about how she had been a good neighbor for decades, who supposedly had never let me down. The old cogs in my brain clicked on that she was after something, so when she raised the topic of my inheritance, it came as no surprise. For her, long years of being a nice person Betsy felt like she was owed something, a piece of my will to be exact. And when I told her that I planned to leave everything to my family and family alone, she had a complete meltdown. As passers-by and neighbors came over to sneak a peek at the drama, Betsy continued her performance out on the yard, giving me a moment to shut the door unnoticed. The crowd seemed to disperse after that though. Betsy looked far from done as she yelled and pounded on my door. I relaxed when I finally saw her stomp back towards her house, falling exhausted onto the sofa. A few minutes later, I was interrupted by yet another knock at the door. My thoughts jumped to my wife returning home early and unable to get in as I triple-locked the door after the earlier incident. Struggling back to my feet, I unlocked the door ready to greet them when instead I was met with the end of a shotgun barrel. The craziness that was Betsy holding it pointed directly at me. There were no nosy onlookers to save me this time, as Betsy shouted and ordered I change my will to leave her everything. My mind froze in terror at this hostage situation, as I could only helplessly agree to her demands. Sometime later, I was saved by the quick actions of my son, who I had not even noticed approaching. In a blur, he was able to wrestle the shotgun out of her grip and knock her to the floor, where she stayed until the police arrived. The police were still here when my wife returned home a few hours later, though they dragged Betsy away for interrogation a while ago, despite some very vocal and aggressive protests on her part. We unanimously decided to press charges for the assault, which was also surprisingly easy to prove as Betsy had a history with the police for anger management issues and assault. This time, however, she was not going to be let off lightly, as she added an unlicensed firearm to her list of charges. The local news told us the rest of the story. Betsy was sentenced to 3 years behind bars, extended to 5 when she tried to attack the judge afterwards. I guess she really did deserve it after all. And yeah, ripe stars, these entitled Karens really feel no shame anymore. I mean, trying to steal the property of a dying person, how much worse could it get, honestly? I am frankly speechless. Either way, if you liked the story or at least found it interesting, then please don't forget to like the video and maybe even post a comment, because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much, and the next one is titled Terrible Customers. I'm normally a friendly and helpful person towards customers, and the store I work in is big and it can be hard to find things if you're not familiar with the layout. So I really don't mind too much when someone comes and finds me several times in one visit to ask for help, provided they are not a total idiot about it. A few days ago, a couple came in. Anyone who has ever had a job involving customer service knows the type, very entitled, a little rude, and all too demanding. The first time the guy, we will call him that guy, asked me for help, he was a little rude and not paying much attention. He called me ma'am, but I'm not a girl. But I didn't think much of it. I smiled and helped him find what he needed and went back to what I was doing. The couple were there for about an hour, not in any rush. That guy had a real knack for being a few feet away from the service counter with 2 to 3 people who were clearly doing nothing. And then looking around for the nearest employee who was clearly in the middle of something on the floor, then pulling us away from our tasks to ask really obvious and stupid questions. This was a little annoying, but once again, I was used to it, so I just went with it. Then that guy decided it was time to go. I was up front busy searching for a missing item. That guy comes up with an armful of stuff. The cashier was busy helping someone finish paying with the rather confusing credit card machine, and behind him there was one more person with maybe 2 or 3 items. That guy took one look at the line, if you can even call it that, which would take maybe 2 minutes at most to get through, and decided that he didn't want to wait. Keep in mind he had been there for an hour and his wife was nowhere in sight. He turned to me and loudly announced so the other customers and cashier could hear, "Hey, I have somewhere I need to be, and I don't have time to wait. I need another checker." I think he was assuming that I would just jump on the other register so he could bypass the line. For a brief moment I was a little taken aback, but I quickly covered it up with a smile. "Okay," I told him, "I'll go see if I can find someone." The other cashier for that shift was on a lunch break, and I knew the manager, the only other person who was allowed to help out if their line got bad and the second cashier was not available, would not want to deal with that guy anyway. I took the opportunity to leave the area. Later, I found out that immediately after I left, another employee happened to walk by, and that guy demanded that he too finds another cashier, so he ended up having to wait. And the next one is titled Bartender Revenge. And by the way, if you have ever worked in customer service before and have gotten revenge on entitled customers, please let us know in the comments how it went. I work at an upscale restaurant that is half bar. Last night a group of pretty well-dressed women in their 30s strolled in about 12:30 and demanded a food menu. When I explained that our kitchen closes at midnight, one of them angrily pointed at another table and screeched, "Well, they have food." When I tell them that that particular table ordered their food 20 minutes prior and that's why they in fact have food on their table, she waved me away, telling me to ask the kitchen what they can do. The kitchen relents and the ladies get a hummus and I set it down and they descend upon it, nary a thank you. They don't order anything else and I keep enough of an eye on them to make sure they are taken care of without me actually having to interact with them more than I have to. The last time I check up on them asking if they need anything, I get a curt no. 5 minutes later, they are gone. My annoyance turns to glee when I go to clear the table. One of them has left behind her iPhone, I drop it into my apron and walk up to a guy that I saw chatting them up earlier and ask if he knew them. He tells me no, that they were horrendously witchy and that he got the F out of that situation as soon as possible. I tell him my experience with them and he asks how much their bill was. It was around $10. He then shoves $20 into my hand, telling me he will cover it and I can keep the rest. I try to refuse it since it was not his fault that they walked out, but he insists. I go to the office and explain the situation to my manager, who is as pissed off as I am. When one of the women's friends calls the phone, my manager answers it up and tells her that she is welcome to come by to pick up the phone and pay her tab, otherwise she will have to wait until Monday at 5 p.m. to get it. We are closed on Sunday. If it had been any other customer, we would have worked something out to get her the phone to her earlier, but F her. Well, apparently, this woman has a friend who knows one of our bartenders. This friend calls our bartender, who I'm fairly close with and knew about the situation, asking if he could bring the phone to her on Sunday. He tells her no, that the woman skipped out on her bill and will need to personally come in to get her phone. The woman never came in that night, so basically, this woman will have to come back into the restaurant she essentially stole from, is gonna be without her phone until tomorrow, and look like a complete idiot in front of her friend in the process. I bet you wish you paid that $10 tab now. Update: the bartender relented and brought the woman her phone on Sunday night on the condition that she pays her tab. According to him, she was a huge entitled Karen who just shoved a $20 bill at him and did not apologize for skipping out on the bill. And yes, I could have thrown the phone away, but I felt like that was too much. I think the inconvenience of having to go nearly 24 hours without her phone and the embarrassment of acting like a complete idiot was punishment enough. And yeah, ripe stars, if you would have been in this situation, how would you have handled this? Would you have thrown Karen's phone away? Let me know in the comments. And the next one is titled, Never Follow the HOA. I've had a previous experience with this group as I live in a neighborhood that has an HOA, but I was there before the rest of the houses were built and before they formed this group. I'm not a member in any way, and that has been verified by a real estate attorney. So anyway, apparently they have a rule over how many lights you can put up and what the earliest date you can put them up is. The woman who I deal with the most when I upset them came by on November 30th and told me my lights were against the policy and that I was not allowed to have as many lights up as I do. I told her that we have been over this before, that I'm in no way beholden to their policies and I don't care. I told her out of respect to the people in the neighborhood I did like that I was not gonna go full Clark Griswold on my house, but that my nieces and nephews loved the lights, so I would be putting up a fair amount. I also told her that I didn't care about their rules that the lights could only be on during certain hours and that once done putting them up on the 30th, I would likely turn them on and leave them on until Christmas. She told me that me breaking the rules upset other members and that I should respect their rules even if I don't follow them because I technically live in the neighborhood. She offered me a flyer which apparently had their rules for lights. I tossed it in the trash and told her just to get off my property. I probably could have entertained some of what she asked, but I've just had enough of them. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? And yeah, ripe stars, I will relay this question to you. Do you think that OP is the a-hole in this story or not? Let us know in the comments. Comment number 1 said, not the a-hole. As someone who reviews HOA bylaws and other pointless stuff, I disdain HOAs in general. Personally, I would have taken it and lit it on fire and be like, you can get off my lawn now. Comment number 2, not the a-hole. These rules simply don't apply to you. Do you know who their HOA management company is? I would bring it up with them. If this woman is marching onto other people's property and making baseless demands on behalf of the HOA, she could cause real problems for them. The next one is titled, Revenge on the Manager. I have worked at a certain home improvement store for close to a decade now, about 8 years roughly. The first 7 was in NC before I moved up further north to be with my best friend and her husband, who I learned was pregnant with my first godchild. As such, I transferred up to a store in the area and put my nose to the grindstone. I worked garden before and did that for some months before I started to be moved from department to department, as this store was low on staff. However, this was not full-time, my old HR had dropped the ball and this store believed I wanted part-time. Having already moved, I grabbed a part-time overnight job at a gym to make ends meet and continued to work, all the while asking repeatedly for full-time at the main job and never getting a definitive word back or change. Several months into this, my goddaughter was born. As I lived with my friends during this time and during the time of the virus pandemic, I spent quite a lot of time helping to raise her and we became close. I would take time off that I was allotted to help look after her and there was little problem. Half a year into this change and I had made a good name for myself. I did not have a good deal of friends per se, but I was respected for my work ethic and willingness to help out anyone in any department that asked me. Enter a new assistant manager. The ASM was abrasive to the staff and used to getting her way. The first I heard of her was when she outright fired a girl working the front desk because of a Playboy tag on a jacket. Myself and several other employees organized a walkout in protest of this and succeeded in getting the store manager to reverse the decision made by the ASM. This was not our first walkout, having done this in the past when another ASM, the current predecessor, made sexist comments about a cashier. Soon after this, I was given full time by the ops manager, working in receiving for her cantankerous supervisor. We often did not get along, especially as my godchild got older and I took on babysitting duties while her parents worked and slept. It was not something I minded as I adored the child. I often talked about her with my coworkers and loved to show pictures and stories. However, this was not something shared by my higher-ups. My supervisor was upset that I could not work overtime to help him, as we were the only two in receiving for the store because of either my second job or babysitting. And soon after the second walkout, I was made aware of a rumor circulating around the store that the child was in fact my own daughter that I had fathered outside of my friend's husband's knowledge. The source of the rumor was unknown, but my ASM had made disparaging remarks to me in the past about men taking care of children, so I had my theories. My holiday plans, asked of in advance as soon as our electronic system allowed, were cancelled without explanation, both Thanksgiving and Christmas. I had never missed a major holiday since I moved north, and I had asked the same days off the year prior, and had gotten them off before the ASM arrived, which was strike one for me. And soon after this, my supervisor, whom I work closely with every day, had a positive virus test, forcing me per company rules to self-isolate until I could get a positive or negative test myself. During this week, as it took a full week to find a place with enough room to give tests thanks to the variant, I was harassed repeatedly by text and phone call by both management and my supervisor to track down an at-home test and get back to work ASAP. All the while, I had to inform everyone I was in contact with, including my friends, family and roommates, that I had been exposed, risking their own holiday trips and plans, which was strike number 2. Thankfully though, my virus test was negative. A week after this, the Northeast gets slammed by a snow and ice storm. I drive a 4-wheeled vehicle and so made it in, but near the end of my shift I was made aware that my friend's husband had been injured and stranded in a car accident on the ice, and so left to get them home and their car to a service station. To add to it all, they have lost power in their home with an infant, leaving me with the only person they could turn to with a vehicle and power. I'll admit, I had few sick hours left, but informed work that I would be out on a family emergency. For that week I called out each day with ongoing family emergency, with snow and ice still coating the streets and power still down throughout our city. And every day I was hounded by calls from management demanding I return to work regardless. This would not have only risked my own safety, but would have stranded my family at my apartment with no way to get supplies or get home once the power returned, which was strike number 3. I was done. Early in the morning that following Sunday, I walked into work and placed my resignation letter on HR's desk. That is important later. I had tendered it to be immediate as I live in an at-will state. Was it petty? Yes, I'll freely admit that. I had given 8 years of my life to this company and asked very little in return. As I was leaving, I crossed paths with my supervisor, who asked angrily if I was finally coming back to work. I informed him of my decision to leave, ignoring his provocations, and left to go home and sleep. Several hours later, I received the gift that would ignite my semi-accidental revenge. A single text from my ASM. "We will see how long you can take care of your love child without us." Well, seems I found my probable source. My friends had been made aware of this rumor from the start. I did not hide anything from them and did not want any kind of rumor, however unlikely, to reach them from anyone but me. They are my closest friends and compatriots and have given me the greatest gift in the form of my godchild, whom they insist I call my niece as I am family. Love child feels like a slur against her, and I'm not cool with that, and neither are they. However, they informed me of the monumental screw-up my now former ASM had made. It was time for corporate HR to be made aware, and so I began to compile my evidence, the text from my supervisor, the call records and messages left, and this holy grail of a text message. If I was going to leave, I was at the very least going to give some blowback on the team that had been so willing to target me. What happened after is secondhand from friends I had still at the store, so I cannot entirely verify all of it, but the ASM played herself. The following day, a meeting of management and supervisors was convened, where the ASM made it known that I'd been fired, not self-terminated, for job abandonment and immorality. And unless I am grossly misinformed about the nature of American retail work, immorality is not a fireable event. To my supervisor's credit, he defended me to the ASM and was fired on the spot. The store's HR rep, having earlier gotten my printed termination letter on his desk, made it known that I had indeed not been fired but left on my own. And the ASM attempted to fire him as well in front of the staff. And from there, it spiraled. According to my source, entire departments began to walk out or outright quit, having had their own problems with the ASM. Appliances quit to a man. Garden left with their manager to work at a competitor's as he had been working on this well before my saga began. Front desk walked out in protest as it came out that the ASM had threatened and blackmailed several Muslim part-timers to not wear their headscarves if they wanted hours. Lumber, receiving's main partner, quit. ProDesk joined the front desk protest as one of their number. A Sikh man had also been threatened. Both head cashiers quit and the other trained cashiers walked out with the desks. Ops manager had informed the district manager and quit outright before he arrived, walking out with the HR rep and my old supervisor. My source's last report of the ASM was seeing her sprinting to her car after having heard that the district staff was inbound and the store manager was forced to shut the store down for the next 2 days, last I have heard. I've been in contact with the other injured parties and we are compiling all the evidence we've collected, as several of the families are hiring lawyers. I suspect the company will attempt to keep this quiet. I just never suspected that anything like this would happen. I have a full-time position at the gym upcoming and I've been enjoying the extra sleep and time I get with my family. I am never working 56 to 64-hour weeks ever again, and I will never darken the doorstep of that store again. I hope my ASM enjoyed the temporary rush of power. I suspect she won't get it ever again, at least not in manager positions. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.